Thank you, Chair. And while you stole my thunder, I will also go ahead and congratulate the PBO on being ranked #1 in the world by the OECD. We recognize that this is the result of the PBO doing many things right. Having said that, there are recommendations in this report, and we would expect that because there is perhaps always room for improvement. And they suggest that this would further cement your position as an international leader in fiscal oversight. So one of the recommendations that the OECD included was that there be a way to have parliamentary involvement in interim appointments, and that this could be to require secondary approval from a committee. What a novel idea. In November, I put forward a motion that was passed by this committee that would have sought to do this very thing, to have possible candidates for the position of the PBO interviewed by the subcommittee of OGO. In response to that motion, a spokesperson from the PMO said, and I quote, "They didn't feel bound by the direction from the committee, and they offered that the Privy Council in their refusal to include us in the process protects the confidentiality of applicants." And now we know that parliamentarians often deal with very confidential information. We hold in-camera meetings to do just that. So I guess what I'm wondering is if you would be willing to speak to this recommendation and any others that require action from parliamentarians.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. So broadly speaking, of the 5 key recommendations identified by the OECD, I would say 2 of them squarely fall in the lap of parliamentarians. And those relate to legislative amendments, or legislative amendments that the OECD recommends based upon their consultations with virtually all stakeholders, including the government. So it represents a plurality of views. So this is not exclusively an OECD perspective. It's important to understand that they heard this from many stakeholders. And as well as part of the review process around this report, it was circulated with many external reviewers, other jurisdictions, including the Committee of Senior Budget Officials, of which the Department of Finance Canada is a part. So it's a recommendation that is not uniquely sent to us from the good folks in Paris. For the legislative amendments, again, the legislation is what the legislation is. Parliament has decided that they decided to provide the Prime Minister and the government with discretion around the interim appointment, more discretion than currently exists for the permanent nominee PBO. Should Parliament decide to change that, certainly on the appointment side, something that I believe I mentioned on September 15th as part of my first committee testimony here at the Government Operations Committee is it would certainly be beneficial. And first and foremost, it would be beneficial with respect to the stability, the operating stability of the institution. So Mr. Giroux, his term came to an end. He received a phone call on his final day indicating he was not being renewed. And maybe 24 hours before that, I received a request to step in. And it's just not a good way to manage the office as a whole. More importantly, any shortcomings or any additional challenges on our end result in lower quality services for parliamentarians. And as the Prime Minister and the government has pointed out on numerous occasions, Budget 2025 is potentially the most important budget in a generation. Over the coming weeks, we're looking at potentially the most important aspect of parliamentary financial cycle. Main estimates came down this morning, departmental plans in the next 2 weeks. Shortly after that, we're looking at a spring update as well, all of which involve cuts of $60 billion, layoffs of 40,000 FTEs, and substantial investments on the defense side. Parliamentarians need that support. Well, we're certainly well placed to provide it, and providing additional stability to the office, the Parliamentary Budget Office that serves parliamentarians, puts parliamentarians further ahead overall.
Thank you very much. With my 1 minute left, I would simply state that it's one thing to provide that further discretionary when it comes to appointing a budget officer on an interim basis, but even appointing someone on an interim basis is not a best practice, as noted in the OECD report. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree. And something I mentioned to the committee, and I think many members in this room, was I was very surprised and somewhat taken aback following my appointment, the questions that were raised by parliamentarians and put to me directly with respect to my partisanship. So the method of the appointment created a perception of partisanship very quickly out of the gate. I was asked by many parliamentarians and staffers how well I knew the Prime Minister, how many times I met the Prime Minister, if I was a member of the Liberal Party of Canada, if I had donated to the Liberal Party of Canada, and no one should have to deal with that. And more importantly, as the OECD points out, for an institution that is widely respected as being impartial and independent, having a process for nomination for an interim appointment that leads to that specific outcome just makes no sense. It undermines the entire raison d'etre of having an independent parliamentary budget office.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.